Good morning. My name is Wanda, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the CA Capacity Management Community Webcast, Capacity Planning in the Application-Driven Economy. I would now like to turn the call over to Jeremy Rosbach. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Wanda, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their day to join us for our Capacity Management webcast series in the CA community. We're really excited to bring you this topic today on how important capacity planning is in our new application-driven economy. We're going to get started because we know everyone's time is valuable here. So real quick, again, my name is Jeremy Rosbach. I've been with CA about 8 years, and most of my career actually resides in and around managing, building, architecting data centers. Join with me. I'm very excited to have Mr. Richard DeMark from CA. He is on the services team and has a very long and wide experience in the capacity planning, capacity management industry. Very great relationship with the CMG community, the Computer Measurement Group community. He's on the board with them, and just an all-around expert in everything and anything to do with capacity planning. So with that being said, why don't we begin? So real quick, the reason why we're bringing you this topic today is because there is just so much buzz going on around an application-driven economy that we are in today. As we all know, anything and everything we do when it comes to work, even family, friends, etc., we do through software, right? Communication. Businesses are communicating with partners, with customers through software. We communicate with family and friends through software. I just booked my vacation, all done without talking to anybody through software. So our lives revolve around interacting with applications to get work done and improve our lives. So with that, businesses realize, and they have realized how important the software relationship with consumers is today. And because of that, we're very high maintenance, right? We are ready to jump from one brand to another if the application experience given to us is not up to par or what we expect. We're not loyal. We can move from one vendor to the next or one app to the next, etc., if our experience is not what we think. So we have to get the application right and delivered on the first try, and that's what today's presentation is all about. What are the requirements to survive in this application-driven economy? And we're going to touch on this with the IT supply chain, but it's open communication and collaboration around business owners, infrastructure owners, and facilities owners, all working as one to deliver what's most important, which is a successful application experience to the end user. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different subjects here today, but we want you to understand how we're weaving them together. Everyone's heard of the Internet of Things. That's bringing a lot of data into our data centers today. A lot of data means capacity planning methods need to be in place to manage that data. We will again touch on the application-driven economy that we're in today and the importance and the impact of that on today's infrastructure teams and capacity planners. We will run into the capacity planning stack and stacked metrics. We'll get into more of that, as well as application-centric capacity planning methodologies that support a resilient IT supply chain. So that's going to weave all together. You'll see how we'll tell this story, and why don't we begin. So IoT, Internet of Things, how does it fit into our world? Well, as we all know, we've all heard, Internet of Things is all about many millions and billions of different devices out there today sending data, little bits of data, but a lot more of it, into our data centers today. You know, years ago, or today, we have 10 to 20 billion, connected devices to the internet, and it's expected to grow close to 30 billion or more by 2020. So that's a lot of devices out in the world today sending bits of data into all of our data centers. Are we ready for it? How do we get ready for it? How do we manage that huge dynamic influx of data is what we're going to talk about today. And all that puts a lot of demands on our data center and capacity planning managers and infrastructure teams out there today. Doing all that planning to get ready for this onslaught, as we know and as we've heard, will not and cannot be done in spreadsheets or manually anymore. We have to prepare. Internet of Things, IoT, it's all around us today, right? And if we think about it, it was even born in the data center. IoT years ago was about devices in our data center sending performance data or bits of data about itself to management systems within our data center. That management system was collecting all this data for us, presenting it to us in order for us to make decisions on how to improve or move on to the next step around that application. On a small scale, IoT was built in and created in the data center years ago, but now it's all around us. It's in our lives. It touches us every day. There's an app out there called Retail Me Not, which is something I use and my family uses. When we go to the mall, we get updates immediately on what store we're closest to or in, and alerts us on the savings or the coupons that's available during that time in that store that we're in right then and there. Trying to improve, gathering data on our purchasing processes, making a profile on us and sending us coupons and savings when we're back at that store again to improve our application and lifestyle. The car driving experiences, car insurance companies, right? They collect information about how we drive, how good we drive, how bad we drive, even how fast we go, how fast we brake, etc., all to build a customer profile in order to deliver rates based on that customer profile, whether they're good rates or bad rates, but all to develop a profile for us using this data to provide an experience back to us that hopefully is an exceptional experience. And then in the healthcare industry, actually it's been around for a while as well, but healthcare industries used to send heart rate monitor data over a phone, like a rotary phone. They would record the heartbeat over a phone and then use that information to make adjustments to healthcare. Well, now today there is wireless glucometers and wireless blood pressure monitors, scales, heart rate scales, you know, anything and everything you can think of is sending bits of data about our health, our current health, back to hospitals and doctors' offices in order to improve the health care that they give to us. Just some examples, very small examples, but some examples of IoT that's in our world today and how it's affecting our lifestyles. With IoT comes applications, right? IoT is sending data, feeding applications that it's supposed to be improving our lifestyle. So the applications that are around today are changing the way businesses are run, right? And there's a little tagline here that says the web is going away. If you think about it, it's true. Or the way we use the web, right? Our browser-driven experience is going away, and we're using mobile applications more to do what we used to do on the web, right? When's the last time somebody went to www.weather.com to check the weather on your laptop or desktop? We don't do that much anymore, right? We pull up our phone, we pull up the weather app, and within a second or two, we have the information we need about the current weather or wherever we're going that day. That's what we mean about the web is going away or our browser-driven experience. And that's great for us, right? But what does it mean about the IT teams, the capacity planners that host all these applications we see right now, and all those bits of data and all those requests from us, mobile users, being sent into these data centers? You know, the likes of, if we start on the left here, the likes of Hulu and Netflix are changing the way the entertainment industry is delivering video and streamless entertainment to us. The credit card industry, right? Smartphone applications like Square and Apple Pay, they're changing and challenging the dominance of traditional banks and credit card companies. Examples of how applications are changing the way we do business. Everyone's heard of Uber and Lyft. They're rewriting the way the taxi industry and the limo industry is providing services. And of course the hotel industry. I'm able to check into my hotel on my phone days before I even get on a plane to go to that hotel. I pick the floor I want to be on, I pick the room and the view I want, all via my phone and the application that sits on top of it. And I've told this story before, but there's a little a company, an application that's really gaining some momentum on the East Coast called Relay Rides. And I recently got back from the Florida Keys, and when I was planning this trip, I wanted to find and rent a Jeep Wrangler to drive from Miami down to the Florida Keys, and I could not find that specific car at any Miami International Airport car rental agency. I was astounded, and actually it affected whether I was even going to book this trip, because this is what I wanted. I found this little app called Relay Rides. It's a ride-sharing program, and the folks who sign up for it share their own cars or their additional cars with consumers like me who are looking for a specific make, model, etc., to get what I want, when I want it, how I want it, right? I was a little leery of it last week when I got to the airport and hoping that the gentleman I am borrowing his car was going to show up, but the experience was absolutely amazing. He was there, he picked us up, gave us the keys to his car. We enjoyed the sun of the Florida Keys and the Jeep with the top down all week long. And I saved $500. I paid a lot less than what I would have paid for something comparable at the car rental agency. I got what I wanted, how I wanted, when I wanted it through this new application experience called Relay Rides. One more personal example of how applications are changing and improving our lives today. So we talked about in the beginning how there's so many different connected and so many devices connected to the internet today sending data. As you can see there, the numbers are there, but what we expect in the years to come, it's a lot of connected devices sending a lot of data, driving driving a whole new number of new apps to be developed. As you can see, 2.6 million Internet of Things, IoT applications are expected to be launched in the next 5 years. These apps are digesting a lot of data. Our data centers and infrastructure will be digesting all of this data. What if we do nothing? What if we don't prepare? Well, this is what happens when we're stagnant in our ability to plan for capacity around this new age in the application economy, right? We talked about how high maintenance we are as users today. 20% of users will abandon a web application after just 3 seconds of delay. It was reported in a recent CMG webcast that 1/3 of a second is the expected response time for mobile applications. So, which is amazing and hard to believe, but we are so expectant as users to have everything we want instantaneous that we sometimes only give 1/3 of a second for an app to a device on our phone to respond before we get agitated and frustrated. And because of that, 80 to 90% of all applications will be used only once. So we download it, we use it once, we get what we want, we move on, or we download it, we use it, and it's not what we expected, and we, again, move on. When I've given this presentation before, I would share out my iTunes, and I would show folks, if you go into iTunes and you go to all your purchased apps, anything you've ever purchased since the day you signed up for iTunes, I can scroll through endlessly all the apps I've ever bought that were free, that downloaded, etc., and the list hardly ever ends. And I probably have 2 to 3% of those apps even on my phone today. But the list is long and endless on the amount of apps that I've used once, moved on, forgotten about, or wasn't happy about. And then, of course, not planning for capacity leads to poor application experiences, right? Bottlenecks, infrastructure bottlenecks, high costs, etc., risks introduced into service delivery. A public example of that was when Facebook went public, and they had system problems. It cost them a lot of money. A lot of traders didn't make the amount of money they expected to make due to system problems. Just an example of what could happen when we do nothing, when we plan for capacity in this application economy. And quickly, just want to touch on, what's affected when it comes to all this data from our application economy, from IoT, what's affected inside of the data centers? Our day-to-day jobs revolve around managing a lot of what we see here today, right? We talk about big data. The sheer velocity and volume and structure of IoT data is huge. Years ago, we would send large amounts of data in our requests, right? Like if I was banking years ago, I would log into on my laptop, of course, or my desktop years ago. I would log into my bank and I would make sure that my direct deposit occurred on every other Friday of the month, or I would make a large transfer or something like that. But those days are gone, right? Now I open up my phone, I get on my bank app, and I make a lot of little transactions, lightweight transactions, but a lot more of them. Stuff like bill pays or account balances, account inquiries or transfers between accounts, stuff like that. These are a lot more transactions, but they're more lightweight. So we're sending a lot more data today, but they're smaller in weight, but still a lot more of them. Obviously, all this IoT data affects storage. Where are we going to store it? How much do we buy in order to plan for this? We don't want to over-provision. That's a mistake a lot of folks make today when throw more hardware at the problem. We have to plan cost-effectively and appropriately how are we going to house this data. Of course, there are servers that host apps, never going to go away. This compute needs to be right-sized appropriately to deliver an exceptional application experience back to the end user, which is us, right? And then, of course, the network bandwidth. All this data and all this new data being sent in the application economy from our connected devices, from IoT devices, will put a strain on the current network bandwidth. And then, of course, where there's infrastructure and routers and switches, there's power, space, and cooling supporting it. If not planned for appropriately, we could have the IT side of the house resilient when it comes to compute and storage, managing and supporting the application economy, but poor power, space, and cooling planning. So one's not good without the other. They go hand in hand. And then on top of that, how do we do any of this if part or all of this is in the cloud? So as we see there, our reference from Gartner, deploying a more forward-looking capacity management, capacity planning practice is imperative and will be able to proactively meet the business priorities associated with managing the IoT onslaught. So real quick here, and I failed to mention, and I apologize. If there are any questions, please throw them in the chat window. It's probably easiest. We will take some time at the end to verbally answer any questions that you may have, but throw them in the chat window. We will be monitoring them. But on a side note here, folks who haven't seen this, if you want to visit ca.com/itcomics, we have a whole bunch of comics out there that we've designed to just shed light, a funny light, on the current challenges around capacity planning, IT management, facilities, and data center management. But these are just two, and I know they're probably hard to read here, but our characters, Kip and Gary here, are constantly fighting the same fires that we probably fight today, but they do it in a kind of funny and odd way. Our friend on the left here, our friend Kip, is asking our fortune teller how much infrastructure he has to successfully grow the business. And Gary really thought that he had a better handle on their capacity planning. So it just sheds light on some of the guesswork that is done, right? Some of the guesswork that's done when it comes to planning for new application deployments, hardware upgrades, Initiative A, Initiative B. It really sheds light on some of that guesswork. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, we all probably know and are aware that a lot of data centers out there today may be underutilized, right? We're not getting the most bang for our buck when it comes to compute and storage utilization. This takes it to the next level where their data center is not only collecting dust, but they've got cobwebs and even spiders running around the floor. So just a little funny light we shed on some of the challenges around capacity planning. But, think about it, especially the comic we saw about using the fortune teller to figure out how much capacity they may need in the future. I doubt a fortune teller would have helped these recent IT blunders, but anything could have helped at that point, right? We all know about healthcare.gov and the hundreds of thousands of concurrent connections they had on day one of this application launch, bringing the compute environment and the infrastructure environment hosting this new service to a screeching halt, right? You gamers out there probably remember when SimCity launched a version of their game that was online only. The onslaught of users hitting the website trying to play the game was more than they expected. Users lost where they were in the game, their updates to the game, had trouble even starting the game and logging into the site. And then more recently, Black Friday of this past Thanksgiving holiday, Best Buy suffered a website outage where, literally the most important day of the year, the most important shopping day of the year, and their website was sluggish, unusable, and really, they were socially executed, or so to say, socially prosecuted on the web when this happened. It killed the brand for Best Buy during that period of time, and nobody was happy. The customer experience was obviously not exceptional. So what I want to do with that lead up is introduce Mr. Gamark here, who's going to take us into what do we need to do to be successful. Talk about the application-centric capacity planning methods and how we can be successful to prepare for this onslaught and survive in the application economy. So Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Excellent.
So after this nice build-up, okay, so here's the problem, here's what's happening, so what are we going to do about it? So what we're showing on this slide is, okay, obviously something has to change. If I look back over capacity planning over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we've had a real focus on infrastructure. Started off sizing mainframes and sizing DASD, but now we're into sizing server farms, which is all good, but there's a shift now where we want to consider what's happening upstream and downstream. Upstream meaning the business, and downstream meaning the data center. We need to take into account everything. The entire flow from business requirements through the infrastructure down through the data center. Next slide. So one thing that is going to help us do this is what we're calling this capacity planning stack, which you see on the left-hand side. So this was something that I presented at the CMG conference in 2013 with Amy Spellman. And what we were trying to do, we were trying to come up with a more simplified way to describe, discuss capacity planning through the entire digital infrastructure. And by digital infrastructure, we mean the enterprise computing environment, which goes from application to the technology infrastructure all the way down to data center facilities. And so there's a lot of things. You can go look at ITIL, and there's a number of books out there, but we wanted to come up with something that had simpler words, shorter words to use. So we came up with this stack. And we're going to be looking at part of the stack for this application capacity planning focus. So just to quickly introduce the stack, you see it on the left. It starts from the business, and then you see demand going down. So capacity planning, it always starts with the business. I'm going to be building a new hotel. I'm going to be rolling out a new app, and I'm thinking there's going to be like 100,000 users. Demand, demand. The business describes the demand that they expect to be placed on the app. And then the application capacity planners jump in, and what does the application need to support it? And then once they figure it out, they pass it down through, there may be some shared services, for example, a database farm, but it eventually gets to the infrastructure guys. These are the guys that own the hardware, and they make sure that they have enough hardware in place. And then at the bottom of the stack, new hardware, changing hardware, it's going to affect what happens in the facilities. Facilities guys are concerned with power, space, and cooling. This is the actual environment that hosts the data center. So the idea is demand flows down the stack, and if everything is fine, then feedback flows up. And for the application capacity planning, we're looking at that box number 2. This would be the guys who receive the demand from the business, and they determine what sort of resources do they need for their application. So let's go to the next page. So to support this capacity planning stack, we started looking at it a little more, and we came up with what we call this taxonomy for the stack metrics. Now, everyone, capacity planning, doing performance type work, they love data. Hey, we get workload volume metrics, we get CPU utilization, we get queue length, we get memory usage. There's tons of metrics. But what we wanted to do is organize it so that it's easier to talk about. So we came up with these 3 broad categories. You have IT metrics that we're all familiar with. And then we have business metrics. This may be things like the number of customers. It may be, if you're a hotel chain, it may be the number of beds you're supporting. And then on the right-hand side, we have the data center facilities. So these 3 main categories, they are not standalone. Business overlaps with IT, and IT overlaps with data center. So there's this taxonomy. We have these 3 major classes, but there's some intersections. So as we go through these, we're pointing out what type of metrics may be in these different areas. And again, the reason we came up with this was to make it easier for you as the capacity planner to communicate with others about what sort of metrics, what sort of data do you need, and is this strictly a business metric, or is it in this little slice where business overlaps with IT? So what we're seeing in this final animated slide is applications are in the middle. So applications overlap business, IT, and the data center. And bottom center, we have threads per JVM. That's the old-fashioned IT-centric metrics. But if we look over on the left-hand side, we're seeing more business-oriented metrics. You know, how many business transactions for the application. And one thing that people aren't looking at quite yet is if we go over to the right-hand side where the application overlaps into the data center. You know, how much power? What's the application power footprint for this application? That's something that people are just starting to talk about, and it may be more important in the future. Oh, and one final thing. With this capacity planning stack, the metrics, it works for on-premise, it works for the cloud. It works for either one. Okay, so next slide, Jeremy. So here we're talking about capacity planning. So we're kind of jumping to the end here, showing you this is what you as an application capacity planner, this is what we would like you to come up with. So what we're showing here, this is off the VMware website, what they call the Virtual Appliance Marketplace. And what they have out there is a number of applications. You can see on the screen there, number of solutions, 2,075. And what they do, these are things that you can actually download and try out. And it's pretty neat. And looking at this from the application capacity planning point of view, in the little pop-up window there, we're looking at the SolarWinds Log and Event Manager. They tell you exactly what you need to run it. I need a VM out there which has 2 virtual CPUs, 8 gig of memory, and 250 gig of hard drive. So this is kind of simplified, but this is what we really want to get to. So this right here, these are application capacity planning requirements. This you would pass to your infrastructure guy. So you go talk to your VMware admin, tell them, I need you to spin up a VMware VM, and it's got to look just like this. This is what we want. Now, the one thing that's interesting about this, we put this slide together a couple of months ago. And so the number of these downloaded applications was 2,075. And last night, you know, when I was preparing for this little pitch, it's 15% bigger. We have almost 2,400 solutions out there that you can download. So this is growing, okay? In the VMware appliance marketplace, it's growing. And I expect to see the same sort of thing for non-VMware appliances. But the expectation is that there's going to have to be something similar to that little pop-up that describes what you need in terms of IT infrastructure. And this is what the Application Capacity Planner, it's their job to fill out that little pop-up window describing what's required. So next slide. And so what we're doing here on page 18 is just talking about it in a little more detail. So we have a snippet from this capacity planning stack. And before we get into it, the one thing that's kind of interesting, okay, everything starts in the business. Okay, business demand, I'm rolling out a new application, or we're expanding our customer base. So in the past, capacity planning has been in the infrastructure. You know, if you walked into any IT shop 10 years ago, they would have a set of infrastructure capacity planners. They'd be sizing their mainframes. How many MIPS do I need? They'd be looking at their Unix farm, their Windows farm. They would be sizing the hardware. But what we've been seeing over the last 5 years is this new little guy showing up, the Application Capacity Planning Group, where they have a focus on the application. And they directly talk to the business on the top end, and then they feed their results down to the infrastructure. So new group, Application Capacity Planning, we're seeing it in some major financial institutions. So just quickly walking through this, like we've been saying, business demand comes down from the top, okay, and then the Application Capacity Planner jumps in, and he's the one who translates the business demand into what sort of resources are going to be required. Not exactly where the resources are located, but hey, these are the resources I needed for the application, similar to what we saw in that VMware marketplace. It may be in terms of CPU, memory, I/O, network, or it may even be in terms of how many instances I need. And finally, those requirements are passed down to the infrastructure guys who find a place for it. This may be in an ESX host sitting in your data center. This may be out in the Amazon cloud. It really doesn't matter. Application Capacity Planner has come up with his requirements, and he's passing them on to the infrastructure guys to find a home for them. So next slide. And what we're doing here is kind of tying it up. Now, to be honest, I didn't come up with this slide. And the first time I saw it, here we have a resilient IT supply chain. I was kind of leery of this. Here we're using this new term, supply chain. But when you start thinking about it, if you start looking around, doing some homework, you find that this term IT supply chain is perfect for what we're doing. Because other people that talk about supply chains, this is in manufacturing, transportation, order fulfillment. These are mature industries that have processes in place. It's not quite turning the crank, but they're established, institutionalized processes for doing manufacturing, order fulfillment. And that's exactly what we're talking about doing. Because they talk about a supply chain as being a system of organizations, people, activities, information, and resources involved in moving a product or service from the supplier to the consumer. And that's exactly what we're doing when we talk about application capacity planning. The user, they are generating the demand, and it flows through the application layer, the infrastructure layer, and down to facilities. And if everyone is able to do their job, you get the green arrows coming back with the feedback. So these are three separate, I don't quite want to call them silos, but they're three different areas of focus. You know, with the application guys, where we look at application-specific resources and performance. Infrastructure guys, they're looking more at servers, you know, memory, you know, resources that everyone shares. And then you have the data center facility guys, who are primarily looking at power, space, cooling. Do they have everything in place to support the applications the business is trying to deliver to their customers? So describing this as an IT supply chain, I wasn't sold on it at first, but now I am. This is exactly what we want to do. It's not that we want to get to the point of being able to turn the crank, but what we do want to do is automate a lot of the drudgery. the collecting of data, correlating it, combining it, aggregating it, and saving our precious human time to looking at it, doing the analysis, interpretation, trying to figure out what it's telling us and what we really need to do to support this new application economy. So, next slide, Jeremy. And what we're showing on page 20 here is, now this is not a product slide, this is kind of, I don't want to call it smoke and mirrors, but this is an idea, okay? So suppose we were in this true application-driven economy and we had application capacity planning. This is something that I would like to have on my desktop, or maybe even the business owners would like to have. Because what we're seeing here, this is focused on individual applications. We see SAP, Ticket Exchange, those are each of the rows, and these are just snapshots. I think, in the GUI world, these are officially called badges, where it gives you an idea of how the application is doing now. Now, we're looking at servers, storage, power usage and facilities, network, and the applications. So this is where we would like to go. But, again, we have to go back to this capacity planning stack and make sure that we have a solid foundation on this application capacity planning layer, the guy who feeds into the infrastructure. And if we do, then this is the type of stuff, this is the type of information we'll be able to collect and display to both our end users, ourselves, and to other guys within the stack. For example, take your infrastructure buddy out to lunch and show him, okay, thanks to what you did to support me, this is what we're providing the business. So again, this is not real, but this is where we want to go to, something like this, some sort of dashboard with these badges.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Got disconnected. Gotta love technology. Richard, thank you. Are we ready for this slide, I guess?
Yes.
All right, good. All right, thanks for saving me on that. All right, guys, so actually this, perfect time for me to get disconnected because we're at the end. So we just want to reiterate the fact that how crucial we believe this IT supply chain is to a successful application-centric capacity planning practice, right? As we mentioned, and my pitch in the beginning was applications are the face of businesses today, and we got to get it right on the first try because us as users, we don't have time or the patience for a third of a second or more response time, which is still crazy. But we're high maintenance, and we're not loyal. We will move on to the next greatest shiny thing. So as a business and as service delivery industry, we have to get it right on the first time. So, and that involves every part of the organization that's helping to deliver applications, having open communication and collaboration, delivering the requirements that Richard mentioned downstream, and providing those requirements or providing those resources back up for a healthy, resilient, cost-effective IT supply chain. So, perfect. For the folks who wanted to ask a question, we have one in chat now. Richard, can you see that? That probably is a technical question that maybe you can tackle.
Wow, and I can't pass this off. Okay. So here we got, okay, so what are the methods, models, analysis, and theories used by the application capacity planners? Okay, two questions. That was the first one. Okay, so the application capacity planners, like I said earlier, this is a new group that we've been seeing with the customers we're working with over the past 5 years. The emergence of a separate group that are application capacity planners. They are not responsible for the infrastructure. Instead, their focus is on the application. And if you look at it, the methods, the theories, the techniques are very, very similar to what you see for the infrastructure guys. But instead of looking at the infrastructure, how many MIPS do I have in my box? What's the TPP value for this server? Instead, they are just taking the front end. They're translating the business requirements into what's needed in the application and being able to describe application requirements in kind of a general purpose way. You know, if you look at the CA modeling tools, we have this thing called total processor power, or TPP, or resource score, which is supposed to be, you know, if someone has a resource score, CPU resource score of 100, you should be able to translate that to whether you're running on a Dell box, an HP box, or even moving it into the Amazon cloud. So the techniques are similar between the application capacity planners and infrastructure guys. It's just that they're focused on the business and just taking what happens, the demand from the business, and translating that, you know, putting on your blinders and just looking at that application in isolation. Okay, so there was a second question that came in. Do the supply chain model consider each layer in the stack as service centers in a queuing network? Not quite. Okay, so when we talked about the stack, okay, service centers in a queuing network. No, not quite. If we want to look at this in terms of queuing networks, okay, the application capacity planners. So you may have a queuing network model that, or some sort of model that represents the application. So that application model would be driven by whatever the business demand is. Wow. Okay, but if you look at the infrastructure guys, they're going to have their own queuing network model, which represents the entire set of servers out there. So the application guys, they are just going to be a slice. So maybe instead of the different layers in the stack being service centers in a queuing network model, maybe it would be better to look at it as, you know, within a queuing network model, you have different input streams, different workload streams that might represent different applications. But the different service centers within the queuing network model, that would probably represent the infrastructure, or represent the infrastructure. So I hope that answered the question. So here we get another question. Wow, I guess I should read these before I try to answer them. So will data science be used to decide the proportion between applications? Oh, no. Okay. Dangerous question. Will data science be used to decide the proportion between applications to blame for some sort of infrastructure outage? Wow. I don't even want to touch that one. Yeah, infrastructure outages, it's weird. I was at a meeting this past weekend, and we were sitting around after dinner, and looking back over the past 2 weeks, there have been a number of them. Airlines, stock exchange, newspaper, and these are all things that showed up in the news. So who to blame? If we're doing our job right as capacity planners for the application, infrastructure, and capacity planning, if we're doing our job right, then there should be no blame. It should be a happy world with no problems. So when things do go wrong, I'm kind of wondering who slipped up.
So we got one more question. Oh, they keep coming in. Okay. Jerry's asking, does CA offer a total IT supply chain capacity planning product? So, Jerry, that's not what we were pitching. It was more of a just a thought leadership type topic that we were presenting today. But you know, for the folks out there who are familiar with CA products, CA you know, offers CA APM, which would fit very well in the application business owner unit. To help provide those requirements to IT. Of course, CA offers CA capacity management, which would we could take that data and integrate it into that product to take the requirements from CA APM and make right-size recommendations for infrastructure to host that app. And then CA offers the DSIM, Data Center Infrastructure Management Solution, which we would then pass on the requirements and right-size recommendations we got from CA Capacity Management, forward it on to the DSIM team, who would then take those requirements and right-size the power, space, and cooling. And then, like Richard showed, we would provision all that out. There are products that CA provides today that would help build a resilient IT supply chain, yes, but today's topic was more about providing a thought leadership view of what we think will work versus selling products. So
Jeremy, one thing that I'm thinking, so this webcast is part of the CA Communities website. What if, okay, so this whole thing about this capacity planning stack, IT supply chain, we wrote a paper for CMG for a couple years ago. Suppose we post that out there on our community's website, because in the paper we walk through a case study, an example, all the way through, showing where requirements come in from the business, how they're translated to the applications, and all the way trickling down to facilities.
I think it's a great idea, and we can get that document over to Melissa and Melanie, and they can post it to the site today after the webcast, I'm sure.
Right. Now, you know, the paper talks about how we expect it to work, and it is general purpose. It is not focused on CA products. So this is more of a thought leadership for the industry, yep, how this stack can be applied for today's digital infrastructure.
And one more question, how seamless would the integration between different components and the interface that we've shown? Admit that actually, that integration is happening today at CA. What we showed you was an actual interface from, you know, the products that we sell at CA today. So it is, you know, it isn't smoke and mirrors. It is something that is available and continues to be integrated into a seamless, unified interface. So. All right, guys. Yes, and Jerry, can we send you an email when the paper gets posted, plus the name? Thanks, Jerry Abrams. Yeah, we'll take care of that as well. And you know, I think you guys get a thank you for attending. So maybe we can add that link to the paper that Richard just mentioned that we'll post in the thank you for attending. All right, guys. So I want to give you back some time here. And I appreciate everyone for hanging out with us and talking all things capacity planning. We appreciate and we enjoy bringing the topic to you, and the questions were great. Keep them coming, and please join us again for another upcoming capacity planning webcast. One more thing, if you have one more second, please just rate what you thought of today's webcast. It helps us improve. Your feedback helps us improve how we deliver these webcasts to you. So if you could just take a second and fill that out before we say goodbye, we would appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That does conclude today's call. You may now disconnect.